I don't know whether any of you have been in that conversation or not, but it's kind of an emerging thing. It's interesting to tie this to a conversation with the Texas Board of Professional Engineers. It's one of the things they're talking about is licensing computer engineering. And it's kind of rooted in the same thing. You know, you now have these things that are running traffic signals, that are running very important operations that are public safety or public works based. So what are your standards for making sure that these things are built to the appropriate standard? How do we bridge the gap? I'll start by pleading guilty as an engineer to techno-speak. You know, when we're dealing with fellow public servants who don't speak our language, we all speak a language of three-letter acronyms, or I call them TLAs, that don't make any sense to anybody else. And so, you know, how do we attack these barriers to communication between us and other public servants? And I think we have to own this. I think we need to own this, because you can't be communicating with somebody that doesn't understand you and blame them. You know, that's a recipe for disaster. Somehow you have to be able to communicate what we do in a fashion where the general public, the elected officials, the community, and other public servants understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And in our environment, and y'all are very, very familiar with this, you know, it's a real, we almost wind up being translators. You know, what is a landfill permit? What's it mean? What is an MS4? What is a SWIP? What is all of these things that I think most of us intuitively understand, that people look at us and go, you're the reason we're not getting the project done. All that regulation is your problem. I, from whatever city manager, want this project. And you're telling me it's going to take 3 years. What the heck is an environmental assessment? What is that? Or you know, what is a programmatic categorical exclusion?
And who's the MPO?
Yeah, and who's the MPO? Who are these people? Well, why do they have anything to do with us getting this done? And you know, I know you all face this. Everybody has an MPO or an organization that they have to deal with for federal highway funds. And it's just, you get into that and then the folks at TxDOT that are used to dealing with that. And they're shaking their head at you going, we can get you there, but not the way you want to get there. And then you got to take that back and get your folks to understand it. What has been your level of success in engaging an audience and discussing FEMA or NEPA requirements? How many of you have tried this? How many of you have had any success in getting, particularly your elected officials, to be interested in drilling down and understanding the basics of the issues? That's been a struggle for me. It's been a real struggle. Most of them want to look at it like this. This is not cool, this is not fun, and this takes brain strain, and I'm not interested. So you deal with this, and then tell us what we need to do. Well, that doesn't help us get there. It doesn't help your elected officials plan for the things that they're going to have to do. The decisions are going to have to be made in the next flood control ordinance, in the next round of whether or not your levies are certified, and who's going to be buying flood insurance and who isn't. And bridging that gap has become increasingly difficult. So it becomes a question of how do you converse? How do we actually get there? So the question becomes, what kind of tools can we program that will help us bridge that gap? How do we do the outreach? What's our approach? I know what we've done with some success actually is we've embedded public information officers in our departments. And it's helped because what we found, and it's really interesting, is if you embrace the press and will tell a story on a daily basis. You'll be surprised how many of those stories they pick up, because press people often have slow news days where they're looking for information, they're just looking for a story to fill a place, to put print on paper, to put a microphone in someone's face because they have time left over in their 30 minutes. And it actually does give you an opportunity to do that. The question is, how effective are we in getting it done? I'll tell you from the basis of our city, it's helped a lot. It hasn't fixed the problems. It hasn't fixed what I call the street paradigm. And here's how I describe the street paradigm. Citizen says, when are you going to fix my street? My street has never been fixed. My street has potholes. My street is broken. My street doesn't care. When are you going to fix my street? Answer, your street isn't funded to be repaired, and its pavement condition index doesn't take it to the point in the budget you can repair it. Well, then I'm going to approach my elected official. I absolutely encourage you to do that. So they do. Conversation gets elevated. When are you going to fix my street? In the case of the elected officials we have, they're sensitive to that. They approve some money to do some street work so that we can start trying to get back. You know, we have streets that were built in the mid-20th century that haven't been touched since. And so some work is funded. They go home one day, they see orange barrels. What's going on with my street? Oh my God, they're fixing my street. They've torn up my street. When are they going to be done with my street? And is this not a cycle? It's like a never-ending cycle. And it never goes away. And then you're done, and it's like, well, I didn't want this sidewalk here. How come you didn't ask me about putting that traffic calming device there? It's a real complicated situation that we all face, and I wanted to really just bring it forward, try to talk about the elephant in the room a little bit, and kind of see what kind of stories you all have, or what kinds of experiences you have in terms of what you face. And that's honestly all I have to present. I'm really interested in any comments, observations, criticisms. Yes, sir.
I don't know if you've ever seen the Larson cartoons, but he has a very warped sense of humor, but he does these little one-page cartoons all the time. And one of my city managers, we had done a downtown project. Stuff was torn up all over the place, people complaining. And he brought me this cartoon, and what it is it shows the devil with a pitchfork in this guy's back, saying, come on, come on. And he's approaching two doors. One says, damned if you do, the other says, damned if you don't. And I've got that hanging up in my office because that's what you're talking about in this paradigm, is if you're damned if you do it, because you put the sidewalk in the wrong place, or you whatever, and you're damned if you don't. So as a public works professional, I just feel like, you know, we have to do it like you say. We have to progress with the citizens in mind, with the greater good in mind, and take those bumps as they come, and hope to educate the rulers, the council, the county commissioners, the city commissioners, whatever, as to why we're doing it the way we're doing it, and hope that the heat falls on them as the decision makers, and just keep doing what we do, because you can't get out of that paradigm.
Who do you work for, and what is your agency doing about that?
About what?
About that problem.
Well, I work for the city of Dumas right now. I've been there for about a year. And what they're doing is they're spending a lot of money getting us caught up in a lot of ways. We've been behind the curve. They've spent a lot of money in the last 3 to 5 years getting the infrastructure back up to where it needs to be, and they've committed to taking the heat. You know, saying we're going to have to pass this bond issue. We've got to get this done. We've got to rebuild the water system. We've got to do wastewater projects, and they've been really good about taking that heat. But they require of us that we give them all the information we can possibly give them, so that they're educated enough to know when they're giving the right information out.
So this is Dumas, the great municipality between Hartley and Stinnett.
The greatest municipality between Dalhart and Amarillo.
There you go. All right. Now I'm familiar. Cool place. Yes, sir.
I certainly don't have any answers, but to me, one of the problems is, rightly or wrongly, that there's a perception that government wastes money. It's So when the public sees an iconic structure, the first comment is, why the heck did you spend X amount of money wasting my tax dollars on something that looks iconic instead of something that looks like a blob sitting in the landscape?
And how does the ADA Act play into building a gazebo in a park in terms of it costing $20,000? Because you're dead on right from my experience. We put in a water fountain in a park that cost us $5,000. The fountain was $500. The accessible path to it was the rest of the $5,000. And I don't know that we'll ever win that outreach conversation. But somehow we have to have it at least. I go back to, I think we have to put the burden on ourselves to figure out how to have that communication, or otherwise we will continue to have an eroded funding base, an eroded kind of view from the public officials and the public at large because of those things. And so much of the regulatory environment drives those costs. How much of a lane mile of highway goes into environmental assessment, engineering studies, and alternative analysis?
See, now we're back at the same point. That's a government thing. I mean, now when you say the government, obviously federal and state level, they kind of lump us all into one group. And I don't like that very much, but they do. So when we're explaining a regulation to the general public, all they see is there's a public official explaining the regulation that he probably came up with. I mean, again, I don't have the answer. It's frustrating as heck when we're sitting there dealing with it.
Or even worse, you're the obstruction.
Yeah.